Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Reactive to Proactive, a liability-first approach to driver behavior and video intelligence, sponsored by Connexial. I want to thank you for joining us. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Greg Wisnett, a risk manager formerly with Shaw Industries, has more than 30 years of experience in transportation, safety, and risk management. He holds a bachelor's of science in exercise science from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and has served on safety committees for both National Private Truck Council and American Trucking Associations. Brad was named the MPTC Safety Professional of the Year in 2009 and holds certifications as the Director of Safety for NATME and Certified Transportation Professional with MPTC. Our next speaker, Alex Perot, the Director of Product Solutions at Connexial, has more than 10 years of experience partnering with manufacturers and carriers to streamline operations through consolidation and moderation of systems. As Director of Solutions and Product Strategy at Connexial, she focuses on aligning technology, process improvement, and customer needs to drive scalable and efficient outcomes. Again, welcome everyone. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and kick it over to our panelist.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As we all know, fleet safety has always been important, but what we're seeing and what everyone should be seeing as well is that the environment that they're operating is very different from even what we were seeing 10 years ago. Bringing in studies like the FMCSA Large Truck Crash Causation Study, we're seeing that driver-related factors are present in about 94% of crashes, hence the title of today's webinar. At the same time, as everyone may be aware, and everyone is aware, the legal landscape has changed dramatically. Research from the American Transportation Research Institute, or ATRI, shows the median nuclear verdict against trucking companies has climbed to roughly 36 million. Using ATRI and their latest crash predictor research, which has analyzed data from more than 580,000 truck drivers, found that certain behaviors such as erratic lane changes and even failure to signal can more than double the likelihood of a future crash. So fleets today aren't trying to just respond to incidents faster. They're trying to identify risk earlier, coach drivers effectively, and prevent those incidents from becoming claims or occurring in the first place. To help us discuss this and to talk through this, like Alicia already introduced Greg, we have Greg joining us to talk through some of his experience, answer some questions, and dive deeper into this topic. Before we get going, Greg, I want to just give you a moment to give a little bit more on your background in the trucking industry specifically. You have a wealth of knowledge, and I think it's really important for everyone to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, I started back in my trucking industry days back at Little Debbie Snack Cakes. I'm sure everybody's had a Little Debbie Snack Cake in their day. And then also with Shaw Industries. That was 16 years at Little Debbie and 23 years down at Shaw. I've been around a little bit. I've been involved with the cameras. I wish we would have had the cameras back in my Little Debbie days because the technology has come a long way. So thank you very much for allowing me to share my information that I love and I'm passionate about, trying to make people safer and companies safer and keeping drivers and the public safe.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate having you here today, and we appreciate everyone's participation in this webinar. So before we get started, as I mentioned, we're moving into a new era of safety. And I mentioned some of those facts of 94% of driver crashes are related to driver-related behavior. At the same time, we have things like the nuclear verdict increasing, and then just that median, that average trucking crash verdict. As we really focus on things today, driver behavior is the biggest discussion around all of this. And with cameras in cab, with technology in the cab, there's plenty of opportunities to correct this behavior or at least capture it. Now, looking at all of that, Greg, you've been around safety programs for decades. How has the safety environment changed over the years that you've had your experience?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's folks on the call that remember after a crash years ago, we would go to the truck and have to touch the truck and actually download the ECM. That data was very hard to read, depending on what engine you had in your truck. So the technology has come a long ways when it's right here at our fingerprints today, right at the end of our fingers. Plus, we've got video and everything else compared to what we had back in the day. Also, just in situations of making preventability calls, back in the day, a lot of times it was a guess. Sometimes we may have guessed the wrong way against the driver. Maybe, hopefully, we did everything we could to have all the information we could to make that right call. But I can see that with today's technology and everything we're doing moving forward, hopefully and I also say this: back in the day, there was no such thing as nuclear verdicts. Who knew what a nuclear verdict was back in several years ago? So anyway, that's where I see the difference changing.
Thank you for that. And especially looking at the median verdict of 36 million for those nuclear verdicts, or even just the fact that more than 12,000 tractor trailer cases are filed annually, it is an ever-changing landscape. So that's where we start to look at in-cab technology. Now, one of the things we hear constantly from safety teams, especially regarding in-cab technology, is that there are enormous amounts of video, telematics data. It's almost too difficult to run through. So if you're a 400 truck fleet, and let's say you have, or 400 driver fleet, and you have even 5 events a day per driver, that could be around 2,000 events per day that someone on your safety team or a group of users, safety users, have to file through. And at that point, you have your team members spending more time filtering through videos, filtering through events, than you actually have them addressing that driver behavior. Now, Greg, from your experience, what happens when safety teams get overwhelmed like that?
From great experience, past experience, I remember when we turned our first set of cameras on, it was way overwhelming. We had so much information. We felt like we couldn't stay up with our timeline of making sure the driver got coached during a specific time, either 5 days, 7 days after the event. Sometimes it was longer than that, which made it tough because once a driver a week or two out on the road and then they come back in, a lot of times it's like I'd forgot all about that. I didn't remember it, things like that. And then you also just the coaching just gets so far behind your whole team, gets a little frustrated. I'll be even honest. I even went out and recruited some folks at my previous company at Shaw to help us watch these videos. We got so far behind. But then when I learned about AI, man, we were able to turn that system on and the light came on.
And that's exactly where we're starting to see AI step in. So you look at things like, if we go back to that initial statistic of 94% of crashes are related to driver behavior, and then you double down on that fact that there's research indicating that certain types of behavior leads to those crashes. So if we can identify that behavior ahead of time, something like lane changes or failure to notify when you're changing lanes or turning, if AI or even humans can identify that behavior ahead of time, that can actually hopefully prevent those issues from occurring. So that's where we're starting to see, and I believe everyone should be familiar with starting to see that in either identifying those things like distracted driving, maybe cell phone use, but taking that data and turning it into action. So you can use AI to analyze driver behavior, you can analyze road behavior, you can analyze stop signs, red lights, maybe capture speed limits as a confirmation that that driver was speeding. What it also does is take that data and break it down into what's the priority. So if we want to focus on something like erratic lane changes, now I can use my technology and I can use that AI to say, let's highlight the trends on erratic lane changes, or let's highlight drivers who have decreased maybe erratic lane changes. Now we can start to also turn that into a positive impact. So when we look at it, if fleets can identify those behaviors earlier, like failure to notify when you're turning, lane changes, cell phone use, things like that, that gives the opportunity to safety teams to coach their fleets before ultimately that incident occurs. Where we go from there is, even with that AI, even with all the technology in the cab, there is a there's still a ton of data to filter through. And even then, there's the part of false positives, there's the point of just thousands and thousands of like something like a seatbelt event. So that's where we start to introduce a managed safety review, which humans can still do things better than computers. So ultimately, we've introduced the model of you let the computer do some of the work, and then you have humans as a backup to say, okay, let's analyze all of this and confirm that it's a real event, or start to highlight those exceptionally egregious events. Now we can take that one step further and also take in positive events. So if it's something like an aggressive braking, maybe that was preventing an incident from occurring. While the AI that exists out there is improving and is starting to capture events like that, there is still validity to a human, not on your team, but on a technology, on a software company's team to actually review that. So in that frame of reference, when we talk about like a harsh braking event or even a lane weaving event, the big thing there is context. So Greg, from your experience, how important is that context when reviewing those safety events?
Yeah, thinking back, I've always used the terminology being proactive instead of reactive. That's a big thing. And what this technology has done for the trucking industry, and it does for the trucking industry, is it allows us to take the information that we see from a driver and help coach them on the front end of these safety events that occur. You know, back before cameras, all we could do is be reactive to maybe a driver call in from the public saying, hey, your driver ran me off the road, or your driver was tailgating me. So all we could do is go to that driver and say, hey, we had a call in, watch your P's and Q's, try to be a little safer. That's all we basically had to go on. And the driver just kind of sloughed that off, and he didn't really remember when it happened anyway. So now with the data and the technology that we have with the cameras, we can go back and we can pull that event up and be able to help coach that driver to be proactive with teaching them to use safer driving techniques. And in the long term, you're gonna save that next accident along the way. So the response to the driver is typically, man, I really did do that. But back before that, it was like we always said, the big eye don't lie. But now that we've got the big eye watching them, and it really helps them. I think it's a positive for the majority of them. There's some of them that are naysayers and will think that the cameras are watching too much. But I think the technology is perfect, and the context of humans being able to work along with the video, it's light years ahead of where we were, which is making a huge difference in the industry.
And even to that point, driver adoption is one of the biggest discussions around cameras in the first place. So we talked a lot about concerns with like false positives, but driver adoption is huge. That is a critical component to this, because technology only works if everyone involved can accept it. And when we talk to fleets, when we work with fleets, that is one of their largest concerns. And it's absolutely valid, because if drivers feel like that technology is just there to punish them, then you're going to run into issues with actually adopting that technology. So where we need to reframe that discussion, and just like Greg said, is this is not here to hurt you, it is here to help you. And from all of the research, all of the data that's out there, most crashes, or many crashes, are initiated by passenger vehicles. We have thousands and thousands of videos out there that prove that a passenger vehicle sideswiped into a truck, or a passenger vehicle was malicious, and in that case tried to blame it on the truck, but those cameras exonerated the driver as well as that carrier. So it's really, really important to adjust the discussion from this is punishment to this is going to help you. And then we can work in things like positive reinforcement, other opportunities like that. Greg, I know you just talked about it a little bit, but I want to throw it back to you, because you have a lot of experience working with drivers and even going down the line of driver adoption. So I want to throw it back to you there.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. Back in the day, when I would make a call on preventability or preventable on accidents, like I said, I tried to side with the driver a lot. But man, after we've got the cameras in the trucks and I started seeing all these, for instance, lane changes, the camera that looks out the front's one thing, but the lane changes, I felt like I probably was a little tougher on drivers than I should have been. There's a lot of cars that come into the side of our trucks that we would have never thought that a four-wheeler would do. Sometimes I know the big truck always seems to get the bad rap sometimes, but there are a lot of four-wheelers that come into us that we just can't control. One of the things I know you talked about was how to get the driver's buy-in for the cameras. That's Alex. That's a big deal. Like for instance, the big part I think is overselling the cameras, making sure before they ever go into the truck, you're out there talking to your drivers. You're explaining what these cameras are going to do for not only them, but for the company and for the motoring public. It's a big deal to make sure you've got their buy-in. I think a lot of the pre-selling can be done with maybe some ambassadors in your fleet. Some of your drivers that they're the guy they're the guy that's been around 30 years and 40 years, and they're the guys everybody's listening to when so and so talks. People listen. I think it was whatever the insurance company was back in the day, but yeah, I think just making sure you're going out there and doing all that is very important. Give them a leeway into the cameras. Once you install your cameras, instead of holding them accountable for any unsafe acts that they make during their driving, give them a 30, 60, maybe 120 days before you do any type of disciplinary action or anything like that. And you may not even get to disciplinary action. I found that out. Most of the time with just bringing them in and doing some friendly coaching, letting them know, hey, this is keeping you safe, keeping your family safe and everybody else out there. But it makes a big difference, especially when they look at the video, you talk to them about it. Hey, and ask them the question, how can you make a difference with what you just did? Yeah, I really did do that. And I probably need to slow down. I might need to back off. I need to make a little change in the way I operate the truck. But I think all these things together will help sell the program and give the drivers a lot of buy-in, make it feel like it's their program instead of your program pushing out to them.
Exactly that. And along those lines, we've seen a lot of positive feedback from our fleets when they actually implement positive reinforcement with the drivers. So maybe if your baseline is like something like a safety scorecard, we've seen fleets offer monthly rewards. We've seen fleets offer quarterly rewards. I've seen fleets that invite the top safe drivers to President's Club. Little things like that to involve the drivers in the experience and in the actual camera rollout, but B, also giving them that opportunity and showing them that this is not all about just pointing out where you're wrong. It's about, here's how we can work together. Here's an opportunity for you to receive actual recognition for where you're being exceptionally safe on the road. So we've seen a lot of positive feedback with that. And Greg, just like you were saying, shifting from that, I'm going to use this to correct problems, to I'm going to use this to identify safe behaviors, really is huge in adjusting that driver adoption problem. Now, on that topic, and where we talk a lot about exonerating drivers and how this can help carriers, how this can help drivers, a big topic are those side cameras. So initially, most of the camera systems were just road facing. Maybe some people were rolling out the driver facing. But in the last couple of years, a lot of those systems have those side cameras, even the rear camera offering full 360 views. Now, the side cameras are huge. And as you saw potentially from this video, that gives way more information than just, hey, a car hit this truck. In this video, you can see that the passenger vehicle actually drove into that truck's lane. You can see it where the truck sits in the lane, things like that. That will exonerate the driver just from that one clip. So using that, and even just looking at research, which I go back to, is that 80% of those crashes are initiated by passenger vehicles. That's where these side cameras can come into play and can help you with lane change disputes, blind spot incidents, even just that confliction of accounts. In this case, that passenger vehicle said that the truck moved into their lane. We have that full proof that they did not. So, Greg, have you seen situations where video visibility completely changed the outcome of an investigation?
Yes. As far as the great story, I have found out with, the technology we have on trucks today almost keep us from having a rear end collision. It's amazing how the engine brake works, the foundation brake works, and the engine, the vehicle actually itself slows you down. I found over the last several years that our side cameras were even almost more important than the forward facing camera, because the technology in our vehicles is doing so much to reduce the speed and slow that driver down before they actually have the rear end collision. So that's why I'm a big proponent of the side cameras. I remember the first video clip that I got from an accident that one of the vehicles were involved in. And it was similar to one that you're looking at here. And everything was riding down the road. It was a 3-lane. The vehicle came into the side of us, bounced off of us, bounced into another big truck. Another one bounced off of us and back. It like ping pong balled all the way down the road in between us and another big truck. But it was all initiated by the vehicle. More than likely, the four-wheeler was distracted by a cell phone, distracted by something that caused that truck to bounce back and forth. And in that particular situation, it wasn't, I don't think, 90 days later, we get a call from a plaintiff's attorney saying, "Hey, our vehicle was involved in an accident with your truck. We want to talk to you about it. They're doing a information gathering trip. So anyway, send the video to them." Crickets. Never heard back from them. That's what I love to hear as a safety guy in my world. When I can not hear back from an attorney once they send us a demand letter, that's the best Christmas present I can get.
I could only imagine there. Now, so we've talked really about like the benefit of side cameras, the benefit of safety systems in general. As we discuss driver adoption, filtering through events, the other side of where this technology can go, or even where it is currently in certain systems, is evaluating other things. So we look a lot at location-based safety data. I drive up I-95 a decent amount. I know certain parts of, like outside of Fredericksburg, outside of DC, that are nightmares for myself, for probably everyone involved. So what we can start to do is, again, we have all of this data from our ELDs, from our cameras, and we can start to look at and analyze location-based safety concerns. So maybe something like intense highway merge zones, intersections, it could be yards that we're constantly visiting. Again, it could just be specific corridors that are worse than others. When I can start to analyze that data and actually, again, use it, it's great that I can get it, but if I can't use it, it means nothing. So then I can take those high risk roads, intersections, and adjust my routes. I can brief my drivers ahead of time. We're bringing it back to now I can be proactive and anticipate where drivers are worse than others or where roads are worse than others. So, Greg, have you seen certain locations consistently create a risk for drivers in your experience?
Yes, one location here just locally, like you've probably seen it on the top 5 list over the years, was I-24 and I-75 here in Chattanooga. We've seen a huge increase in our construction zone there. I'll let you know, as of about 2 weeks ago, all lanes, all the way through the split, 2475, I would think this year we will be taken off of that list, and you will not see Chattanooga and the I-24, I-75 split on that list any longer because of all the construction they've done over the past few years. But yes, construction zones, things like that. I mean, that's what amazes me, that your technology, the technology we have today, can show us where those are. We can brief the driver that we know is going to drive into that area and let them know before they ever get there that, hey, this is a high prone accident area. We've got data that comes from all of these vehicles and all the technology that we're gathering as we drive through those areas. And it's AI is just amazing, all the things that it can do. I can't say enough about what I look forward to in the future, making the trucking industry even safer with using the AI technology.
Exactly. It's essentially limitless what we can do with that technology out there. And when we start to look at those routes or those environmental risks that we're talking about, now we can pull those into actually dispatching to drivers. So you mentioned I can preemptively warn, like Greg's driving on a specific problem route, I can warn him about it. But also when I dispatch that from my system, I can maybe assign it to my more experienced drivers, or I can tell the system I want drivers who've done this route consistently, who are aware of the problems, to carry on with that one. You can assign newer drivers to maybe lower risk routes. So again, we're using the plethora of data, the plethora of information that we have available at our fingertips, and letting the technology guide us into those decisions. As I mentioned earlier, ultimately humans know better, still know better than computers. The drivers are out there on the roads. So then I can start to take their feedback in addition to the camera feedback or maybe those event-based feedback and take into account what drivers say. If they know a certain state has worse drivers than others, maybe, not to call out anyone on this call, any states on this call, but that could be something that could be implemented in and used to actually dispatch out better routes. So looking at that, do you see safety data, Greg, becoming part of dispatch decisions in the future?
Sure, especially say you got your green driver that just got out of driving school. You bring him into a finishing program at your company. You want them to be the safest and give them the best experience, especially those first few weeks when they're with that driver trainer, and even especially that first trip they go out on their own and they're with that truck by themselves. That's when, man, when we can make sure we route them on a route that's probably safer for them to be on compared to other routes that we have in our systems. That's incredible that we'll be able to do something like that. And apparently we're already able to do things like that. And I just look forward to being able to being able to bring a driver that's new and green. And that just makes that driver's experience even better, which in turn is going to keep that driver around in your seat of your truck a lot longer and just make a big difference for everyone, not only the driver, the company, and the motoring public.
Exactly. The goal there is to make everyone happy and make everyone comfortable and then keep everyone safe. Now, a huge part of that is the data aggregation. A lot of the time, what we see is multiple systems providing that data. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is it does work best when you have a single stream or some way to aggregate your maybe camera events, your ELD, your dispatch, your TMS. There's a lot of different areas that you could be gathering that data. So it's one of those things as we continue to move through all of this in the coming years, pay attention to that and start to look at what you could pull and maybe how you can make better decisions in the future. Now, ultimately tying everything together, we talked a lot about driver adoption, positive reinforcement, side cameras. Most people are familiar with the discussion around cameras. Most people are just familiar with the discussion around safety. It is forefront to every carrier's mind, especially when we go back to the nuclear verdicts and just the increase in litigation against carriers. We keep going back to that other point, though, that as you see on the screen here, 113 drivers with prior crashes are 113% more likely to have an incident again. So this keeps going back to using the data that these cameras are capturing, where we can start small, like identifying minor behavior incidents. I used earlier the example of lane weaving or even failure to turn on a turn signal. But then you also need to start looking at those extreme incidents. There's plenty of data to support the benefit of this. There's plenty of data to support how this can help fleets moving forward. So for everyone on the call, maybe if you haven't even started or you're in the infancy of a safety related program or you're just using ELD data, where you want to start is typically just let's capture everything. And that doesn't mean get notifications for everything. That doesn't mean let's review every single video. Just open up the cameras and say, I want to just start to understand what's going on the roads for my drivers. Then I want to let the technology do the work. And that's where we implement that AI. And most systems out there these days have that AI in the actual camera itself to capture lane weaving, to capture distracted driving, to capture those side events, but then also take that back into the system and say, okay, I want the system to drive that. So we have capture everything, prioritize your events with AI. Then you want to start being consistent with that coaching. So if I just talk to someone today and don't follow up, or if I don't continuously review this data, then ultimately they may revert back to that previous behavior. So that is a critical point. But as Greg mentioned earlier, and as we talked about it earlier, if you have too much data, then it's almost impossible to coach. So again, using human review, using technology, that's where the goal is to coach them consistently. Put as much data in your systems as you can. Flag that it was a busy road. Flag that it actually was an event. Reclassify what that event is. As much data as you can start to gather, then the system can use that and start to provide better information downstream, like dispatch, like road related incidents that we talked about earlier. And then that last piece is just using the safety insights operationally. So that's where we go big picture and say, I want to take all this safety related data I have and analyze it in the sense of all my routes that I constantly am running. I want to analyze it on each location that we're always finding ourselves in. So that's all critical. That's where your technology should be supporting all of this. So if your technology isn't supporting, maybe even giving you the opportunity for better human review, those are things that you need to analyze and potentially adjust. Ultimately, I want to thank Greg. I want to throw it back to him and see if he has any final data. The experience in the trucking industry, as well as safety specifically, as well as risk mitigation, is huge. So, Greg, is there anything else, any final points of wisdom that you have for everyone on the call today?
Yeah, just make sure if you've got the data, you've got to use it. You don't want it to sit and not use it to take advantage of the way that you can prevent that next accident. And just being back to our whole preface of the program, being proactive instead of reactive. Think about that. It'll make a difference.
Yep. Our goal is not reviewing more video today or at any point. It's building a safety system that prevents incidents before they happen. So that proactive before being reactive. At that point, we're through everything we wanted to discuss. So we want to take a look at some potential Q&A and run through those. Alicia, from what we're just reading, there was a question about any success in using the side cameras for preventative training, and are there alerts for near misses? Now, I can take that one. There's multiple, it depends on the system you have, but a lot of modern day technology, our technology, does alert the driver if there is a driver in the blind spot. So you can start to see that outside of just what the actual truck provides. There is opportunity with a lot of camera systems nowadays to capture blind spot warnings, as well as lane weaving, which is a huge piece of this. Even if I'm just slightly going outside of that lane, I may want that actual audio alert to tell me and warn me of it. Now, from the preventative side, Greg, did you have any experience reviewing videos with drivers and pointing out, hey, you're consistently doing this? Do you have any anecdotes that you've seen in your past?
Sure. I remember coaching with drivers and seeing them make a lane change and just not paying attention. They just lost the car. The mirror's right there. You can see the car's right there. And blind spots are really not a thing anymore. When you've got cameras, you've got the hood mounted mirror and the West Coast mirror. Everything's there, you can see, but sometimes they still lose them. So it's just making sure, number one, that the driver's using the turn signal, setting up for that lane change, and making sure when they make that lane change, they've not only checked once, but checked twice. And it'll make a difference in the way they operate smoothly down the roadway, especially on lane changes. And the cameras, incredible. I never dreamed that the side cameras would be more useful than that forward facing camera, but I figured that out over the past several years. It's a big difference.
And to roll that out moving forward too, we're seeing those rear cameras as well, offering additional visibility. So what you've said, and what I think we've said multiple times throughout this, is a lot of the benefit comes just from everything outside the cab.
So thank you all for the great presentation, Alex and Greg, with all of the information that you provided. And for all of our attendees, thank you for joining us. This concludes our webinar, and I would love to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Be safe out there.